Yeah, I'll just do it. Oops.
And you'll tag us in it?
How do I force it into gallery mode?
Is it not already in gallery mode when you're looking at us?
Well, I'm saying when it's recording. Is it just recording whatever I'm doing?
I thought so. Asif, do you know anything
I can see
about
the
that?
live stream. Never mind, I can see the live stream. Okay, you guys ready?
Yeah. I'm
gonna hit live here.
We're live.
Just cool. Live. I'm gonna put on a watch party to the live.
Okay, cool. So it says it's live streaming now. So I just asked you guys to come in here so we could chat about a few points that we were talking about earlier with regards to like where schools are going to be going in terms of, you know, after this pandemic thing is, you know, apparently over. I just asked you guys to come in here so we could chat about a few points we were talking about earlier with regards to where schools are going to be going in terms of.
There we go.
Okay, cool. So I asked Drake and Asif to come on to talk about that because Asif had sent me some stuff that he had found about what they're planning to do in Quebec and some of the schools there. And then Drake was sharing some stuff with me about what's going on in Florida, just in terms of how they're funding schools and some other really interesting stuff. But I figured we'd start with this one point that I found, which was really interesting. Let me see here, this one. Let me share that real quick. That'll be a nice little starting point. Let's see, where is it? Here we go. Can you guys see that article with Bill Gates?
Yeah.
How the Gates Foundation could play a positive role.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the one I saw earlier, but it's basically the same thing. I like the opening part. Okay, so Governor Cuomo has announced what it first looks like to be a terrible idea. I like how they're handling that objection right away.
We know.
Okay, we know what you're thinking.
But the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation asked us to reimagine.
So, reimagine the state school system in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. Gates Foundation has been a driving force behind nearly 20 years of consistently failed federal and state attempts at education reform, including the widely reviled Common Core state standards. So there's just, you know, this whole point. I don't need to go into, I mean, it's CNN. There's probably not a lot of value in reading the whole thing. But at least we kind of see kind of generally what they're trying to get you to see, which is basically here in the headline in the first few sentences, because they know that's all anybody reads anyways. The truth is probably further down somewhere.
Okay. I just wanted to confirm that the screen was being shared on the line.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to stop it there, the screen share. But it's just really interesting because, you know, obviously, like, nothing is coincidental, obviously. Things happen for a reason. And with, like, the two big names, other than Trump, in this whole coronavirus thing, other than, like, Trump and Fauci and that kind of thing, is Cuomo and Bill Gates, okay? And so they're pulling that into the education part while you also have the vaccines and all the other stuff on that side, on the medical side and everything with Bill Gates. And there's all this stuff, you know, information about, you know, his involvement there and what's troubling about all that. But for those watching, it's just like, consider, you know, where Bill Gates is coming from in terms of, you know, we need to mass force vaccinate everybody, you know, keep an ID and certificates on everybody and all that. And then they want to team up to reimagine schools in the, you know, post-coronavirus world and everything. And it's like, read between the lines. Like, they were just saying, like, Bill Gates failed to get Common Core implemented completely everywhere and all that stuff. And also, it was a failed system, meaning it doesn't really educate people properly. We know that. And why? Because you're not teaching anybody in their natural learning ability phase. You're just memorizing them. Common Core is basically a big systematic way of measuring how much a person's memorized and where they're at, so they can be filtered into the proper role in society. It's just like a scientific management, but with a computer. And I mean, I have a Bill Gates book up here, and it's called Business at the Speed of Thought, Managing or Building a Digital Nervous System. So that's what Common Core is. It's like a digital nervous system for tracking everybody in the education system, which is also what he wants to create with tracking everybody who got a vaccine and all this other stuff. It's just craziness, right? So that'll kind of set the tone for a little chat here.
But it's like if Mark Zuckerberg teamed up with public schools,
Yeah.
you'd be like, wait, what the fuck? Like, when did Bill Gates become the authority on like education and medical science and like, yeah.
Okay,
And
you know how everybody.
I didn't think about this stuff before. Let me just be clear. I didn't really think about this before.
Yeah.
Before recently. But it's just, it's way too blatant now.
You know how everybody. I mean, I know there's people who support Trump, but there's a lot of people who just like totally hate him, right? And they just hate him because of all the stuff they think they know about him, right?
Yeah.
To a certain degree, that's how everybody felt about Bill Gates before he reinvented himself. So what I'm saying is, imagine Trump right now, the way how everybody hates him. And then he was like, I'm going to partner up with the education system. Like, say he wasn't president. He was just a business person, right? He was like, so it's just a rich guy who built an empire around a certain industry. And they're like, now I want to go and do this. But everyone seems to like Bill Gates, you know, in the mainstream and the way his image is. And it's just image control. It's all it is, right? But it's like, why is he, what does he know about education that isn't already known in the research and all that stuff? And the thing that really is most troublesome about it is just the point that it's not from the perspective of everybody going to their full potential. Like, let's just like, the system is the way it is. Human nature can't change. You know, there's going to be smart people, dumb people, rich people, poor people. We just got to manage that, right? That's why so many of the elite have this sort of depopulation sort of thing going on that you hear about. It's not that they're necessarily evil people. It's just that from their perspective, the system can only hold so many people because we have a competitive profit-based system, and you know, there's so many people who are uneducated and unhealthy and live in poor environments, and we can't create a system that is best for everybody. So their perspective is just, well, just manage that as the best you can, right? So that's why you see that, I think, a lot. But I wanted to kind of shift gears for a moment and go into some other points, which is like, you know, because there wasn't much information in that article. Like, what is it that they're envisioning? I don't know. But you can kind of maybe extrapolate it a little bit, knowing, okay, Bill Gates is totally on board with pandemic, massive problem, everyone needs to be vaccinated, you know, so you can kind of see where his mindset is at. And then, you know, Asif found some really interesting stuff about the schools in Quebec. Maybe you can just talk about that. I don't want to explain it because you can do a better job because you were the one who found it and everything. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
You know how, I didn't tell you guys how I came across it. It was me and Melat, we were laying down on the couch. And she's like, Asif, look at your phone. She's like, you're gonna hate this, but I just sent you a picture, and it was just a picture, it was just bullet points of these rules that was purported to be how Quebec schools would be ran. And I read it, and I was like, this is a joke. Like, this isn't real, you know? And she's like, it's circulating all over Twitter. And I was like, can you like look into that? And she's like she's a little wizard, right? A little research wizard. She did her master's and got her MRP, this major research paper. So she's a major researcher.
Katie is too. If I'm like, I need the details, she's like,
100%. Just our genius partners, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So she starts looking into it. She's going in. She like leaves to go on like some other call, and I'm getting links from her. Right? It's awesome. And she finds the letters that got sent home from the school boards. No joke, off the school websites that outlaid the same friggin' rules.
Dang.
And I was in shock. And I'm gonna be completely honest, before recently, I didn't give two shits about any of this. I didn't think it was anything to do with my life. If it's happening in the US, because we talk a lot and a lot of it's the US stuff. I'm like, I know Canada and US is correlated, but I mean, it's not going to happen with, you know, near me, right? But it's like frightening now.
Yeah.
I didn't even think that it could go to this length, right? Now, keep in mind, I'll preface it saying that Quebec's in some kind of rush to open schools like next week and the week after. So maybe it'll change a little bit in fall time, but I have them here actually. Let me do this. Share
But at the
screen.
very least, they're already preparing people to accept this kind of very extreme set of conditions and so forth, right?
It's like school's already like a prison. Now watch when you read this, okay? So
No, I like what you said though. Hold on. School's already like a prison. Okay, I know we all went to school. Like it's already like a prison. So we don't need to make it more like that, but let's just see if it's possible.
okay, so I'm gonna just show. Can you see my screen right now?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
So this is the English Montreal School Board. This is one school board, right? And there's another one here, and this is coming off hot off their website, okay? And then same thing for the Sir Wilfrid Laurier School Board. And they both basically have the same rules, but it's just a little bit easier to read in this one. So that's why I'll just look at this one. So maximum of 15 students per class. So watch this. Each child will have their own designated space with a 6-foot distance between them and their peers. Okay. Now let's just take a moment, okay? How much value does the school system actually have? One point of value, I'd say one of the very, very few points of value is like the intimacy of being able to work with your teacher and somebody looking over your shoulder and like showing you what's what and like, you know, like working with you and pointing out your paper and pointing out your mistakes. Okay, yeah. Take that out. It's gone now. Gone. Fugazi, fairy dust, right? Right? So no more getting close to your buddies and friends.
No more peer tutoring.
Yeah, no more peer tutoring. That was the way I got away, was talking to my friends, right? It's like, you know, because I was considered smart in the school system, even though I was in life, I was awful. Let's just be honest.
Hold on, just for a moment. So, you know, I went to a private prep school. I was top quarter of my class, you know, magna cum laude. I went to an elite university that was very selective, the Air Force Academy. I know when you graduated, you were valedictorian, right? Right, Drake, I know you did really well in school. Like we're all kind of three in the same boat, where it was like school was really easy for us. So we're not saying this from like, you know, school was so hard. We're like, screw school. Like, no, like school's very easy for all of us. Okay, so that's not why we're saying this. Like, this is coming from the perspective of us thinking school's already easy, right? You know, and I know it's not like that for everybody. I get that, right?
But the point being is like, I don't have any personal gripes in regards to that, of like being like, you know, I wasn't good in school, so school sucks. It was like exactly what you're saying. It's like the school system valued all three of us as quite valuable.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I got kicked out of class all the freaking time, always being like reprimanded by the teacher for talking, because I just get what they're saying and I just start moving around with my friend. So my way around that was like, let me go like help people with their work. Because I could just be like, miss, look, I'm explaining a question. I would not be able to do that here. It'd be total crap, right? So the other thing is staff will not be permitted to enter that space. Okay, great. So no more like real support from my teachers. They'd have to point, like, how do you point at a paper from like 6 feet away?
Only
like,
if the kid has special needs.
Right. Right here.
What?
Yeah.
And they have to wear protection. You know, you remember, have y'all seen the Charlie Brown thing, right? Where the teacher's at the front of the classroom. I don't know if this will make sense to Asif or not, but in Canada, but like, you know what I'm talking about, Drake, where the teacher,
It's like,
and like, all the kids can hear is the teacher going, wah, 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 and that's like, like that's what's gonna be like. They're gonna have like this mouth, and they're like, and the kids are like,
Could you imagine being like I don't know, 12 years old, and then you're like, miss, I have a question, and then somebody in like a full like bodysuit comes up and it's like,
they have to disinfect the area first.
Yeah, it's like so look, for they're going to be stuck in the exact same spot. They eat lunch at their desk, and for daycare, and for class.
Only go to one room.
Yeah, and then they're going to stagger recess times so that the groups of kids, like let's say if you like playing with your friend in a different grade or whatever, no more of that, with no access to playground equipment.
It's crazy.
God.
So you can't play on the monkey bars. There's play structures. Okay, and again, keep in mind, maybe this won't be exactly like this in the fall. This is for the next coming months. But like, I could go through all. Okay, fine. We're almost done.
It's good.
So they're going to try to keep everybody in their regular setting, but there's going to be teachers who aren't there because older teachers don't have to come back to work. They can work on Zoom. But look at this. No physical education, art, drama, or music classes. What? It will not be permitted to share toys, books, or play, or sporting equipment.
Oh my God.
Wow. Wow.
No more gym, no more live. It's like
No more library? That's not essential. The library at school is in the labs. Literally, sit in your cubicle, memorize the shit we tell you to memorize, repeat it back. Okay.
Oh my God. And it's like they outlined like a quote unquote designated space. That's more like a cell where other people can come in other than the authority if you have special needs. Like it doesn't make any sense.
Anyways, the next one is the best one.
So hand washing. If you weren't doing that before, you should be doing it now.
Frequent and compulsory.
Yeah.
After a cough.
Yeah. Oh man.
Every time you cough, imagine if you got a tickle and you yelled and you scream they're like, oh, you're like, I'm trying to cough. They're like, wait, gotta watch them again.
Oh man.
Well, watch.
This is
you have to keep the hand sanitizer at the front of the class, so you have to leave your safe designated space, go through your corridor, and you can only go one at a time, right? So if two kids cough beside each other, only one can go at a time, right? Because
you have to bring in a specialist for that situation.
Yeah, exactly. And then they have to limit the amount of things that you can carry between home and school. And maybe it's not in this one. In the picture,
hold on. You skipped that one though. The main objective of returning to class is to reinforce the essential learning required to move up to the next grade level. In other words, we're just trying to get you the bare minimum so we can say you should be passed to the next level.
Wow.
That's all it is. If you read it.
In high school, it was separate because this is not for high school kids. It's only for the younger kids where learning is more important. Anyways, in high school, just to give a perspective on essential, it was like there's academic classes, the smart kids. Then there's college classes, and then there's essential. Right? They kind of split it up that way. Or if you were really bad at school, you just go into essential classes. So that's where we're at here, right? So the first few days will be about not about learning what you need to know, essential learning. It'll just be about teaching proper hygiene because that wasn't a focal point before. And then this is a bunch of other
fantasy right now. Like an OCD, like an obsessive compulsive person's fantasy. They're just you all get to experience what I go through on a daily basis. No microwaves.
There's one where it says no water fountains.
Oh, yeah, that's obvious, right? No water fountains. How did we survive before?
But don't worry, guys. Parents will not be judged for the decision of whether or not they return to school.
Okay, you know what's really fucked up, guys, is you start looking at the information that's coming out right now, and they're downgrading the death rates. The CDC is saying it's less than we thought. And then they're even saying now that more people have had it than we realize, so that's bringing it down even further. So, this is not, if you actually objectively look at the severity of this pandemic, there's nothing new.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? And plus, all the other ways they're fucking around with the numbers, like in New York, and they're just randomly counting people as COVID just because they said they are, even though they didn't test them, and all this stuff. So I'm bringing that up because I know the average person might look at this and be like, yes, but we have to because we're all dying from the plague. And it's no, we're not. It's think about this. What if the people, generally speaking, in power know it's bullshit, but they wanted to do this stuff that we're reading about right now? That's what they want to happen regardless. So it doesn't matter if you prove, the death rates or this or that or whatever. It's this is what they wanted. And what I was really thinking about from this perspective with all of this is, because I was talking to Katie earlier, and I was saying, if you look at all of this, it's people, probably a lot of people are not, I don't know how many, but many people are not going to want to get their kids back in school. But not even that, there won't be enough room for everybody because you have to have 6 feet for every child. in all these other measures. So from my perspective, if I'm looking at it, if I'm the school, I've now in the past few months put all this energy and money and focus into training teachers to work from home, into getting the kids to do remote learning. So there's going to be like a few kids that go back and a lot of kids that stay because they won't have the capacity, other than building more classrooms and hiring more teachers and all kinds of crazy stuff.
And the other thing about that is for buses, right? Transportation.
Oh yeah, what did it say about that?
Can you see here? Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Elementary school, a school bus at full capacity, normally 72 children. Normally they can have closer to 48 children, but now the public health requirements reduce it to 12 children.
Because I guess it's like one child per row.
It's like per row, per 4 seats basically, or like 2 per 4 seats kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like they're trying to figure out who's willing to drive their child to school, but don't forget, where is it?
And you can't take public transport, obviously.
No. So water fountains will be off limits. That's what I was saying before. So if you don't bring your own water bottle, you're drinking out of the sink or nothing. And look, this line, and this is from the other newsletter, right? The Montreal one. I think it's Montreal. This one really sums it up for me. Right here. Whatever the grouping or classroom, students will remain in their assigned classroom and their reserved personal space for the duration of the day. That is prison.
That's jail. Yeah.
That's prison. It's like you're going to go out for recess, which is a staggered recess, right? And when outside, class groups will remain separated from other groups, meaning students will not be able to spend recess with children from other groups. So tribalism, you know what I mean? Like it's crazy.
That's ridiculous. That's like literally like you're in a prison cell and then you get some time on the yard and then you're back to your prison cell.
That's exactly it.
So anyways, I just found something real quick. I'm going to put it in the chat window. Maybe you can click on it since you're sharing your screen, Asif. Hold on, let me just put it in here real quick. Because I just found, I looked up this school and they have pictures of like the classrooms.
Huh?
Because they're having to redesign the classrooms. Just click on that picture. I have it there in the chat window.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Can you see any comments?
I see you on Facebook. I see you're on Facebook.
Yeah. Can you see can you see any comments on the live video?
Oh, I'm not even seeing that. Here, I'll pull it up. I actually have it right here.
Okay. Because I have to like download it and stuff.
Oh no, it's fine. I'll share it. Apparently, this is like the school, what the classroom looks like now.
Wow. I think that was taken in Ontario. But
I mean, if you I know it's hard to tell from the picture, but this is 6 feet between each pod.
No, that makes sense.
But I mean, isn't that kind of like the whole? If you just kind of take the logical progression of it, right? It's totally insane. Totally insane. Yeah, man, that is so crazy. So Drake, maybe, and I know Asif, you might have to go at some point. So if so, that's fine. Just dip out. But Drake, I know you had some really cool stuff you were talking about with Florida. Maybe you can share some of that stuff.
Yeah. So some of the stuff that I had found was actually similar to what Asif found about just the way that Florida schools were going to change in general. Specifically talking about like how, there was going to be less kids in the classroom. We're going to have to like change everything that we're doing. And it's really interesting to see, like, it's almost as if, I'm not sure, but it's almost as if all these journals are doing the work for whoever is in power, as far as like whoever wants this idea spread. It's like everybody's doing their own speculation because everybody wants to have their own predictions and stuff like that. And it's like as if it's like just spreading like wildfire from all these different sources, all these different journals. And it's like, oh, you think that's going to happen? Well, I think it's going to be like even worse than that. And like, and then just sharing that idea. Right. And it's like, it's almost like you could just pick from these journals and go like, oh, that actually sounds good. Like, let's start doing that,
Oh, I
But
see. They're doing like the research for them. They're
exactly,
like, okay, we'll take some of that, some of that.
What's
exactly.
the feedback
But
is getting in the comments? Yeah, we like that one.
People
yeah,
didn't like this one. Okay, we won't go with that one. You know, yeah.
I'm actually going to meet with the family at 6 o'clock for this exact reason. They don't want to send their kid back to school in September. So I'll catch you guys later. But
All right, cool.
I look forward to checking this out later.
Thanks, Asif. We'll see you
all
later.
right, sounds
See you guys later.
good.
Peace, Drake.
I'm gonna share my screen, but I can't find the can't find which one I was looking at. I opened too many tabs here. But I found this one article. It was on basically reopening Florida, and what they were talking about specifically was here. Let's see if I can open this one up. Nope. What they were talking about specifically was how in Florida, here it is. There you go. Can you see this?
It's opening.
Can you see it now?
It's black on my side. I don't know why.
Uh,
Because I'm viewing your screen, but it's not showing the thing.
all right. I don't know. I don't know how to work this then.
I can do it.
All right. But you have the article, right?
Yeah, it's the one about opening schools. With
Yeah, the one with Governor DeSantis
Yeah, hold on. We need it.
is like in the main title. But it's basically saying how, yeah, that's the one. That's the one.
Let me get rid of all these.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, here we go.
Much better. Still that same advertisement though. But yeah, if you scroll down a little bit, it shows how Florida gets its funding for schools, right? This is just talking about how, like, you know, who's to blame for why schools are the way they are. And this is talking about specifically the attendance that they're showing has dropped, and obviously virtual attendance is much lower. And part of that I was seeing in a different article was related to a lot of kids are now working, at their fast food jobs, which are essential businesses, and they're making more money because they have more hours. And most of their parents, well, the kids that are dropping off from school, their parents aren't working, and so now they're relying on their incomes.
Oh, damn.
The craziest thing.
That is
they're relying on the students' incomes for their family's livelihood. Ridiculous. But yeah, this goes on to say how Florida gets its funding for schools. I think it's a little bit lower. I don't see it here. But oh, here it is, right here. Sales tax revenue makes up 80% of Florida's general fund budget, which finances education. And sales tax collection statewide fell 25% in March, obviously because that's when the lockdown started.
Yeah.
And then it was much worse in April because nobody went out at all or was even allowed to go to most places in April. And they're even saying that the money that we are getting from the stimulus is going to go into basically this year's budget before the new school year begins July 1st, or before the new budget begins, rather, July 1st. School doesn't begin until fall, right? But what does that mean for the schools then, like, next year? Are they going to have a bigger budget? Are they going to have the same budget? Likely not. It's likely that they're going to have less money for next year.
And I mean, this is stimulus money. So you're looking at, this is just money being printed. Like,
oh yeah.
So they can't keep doing that forever.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And I mean, think about, it says established private schools could lose students. Yeah, because why would you now pay $20,000 a year for your kid just to sit and watch videos online?
Right. Plus, with the private schools, it's like they're only allowing them to open small sections of them.
Yeah.
Like I was reading that as well. Like, there's a private school right up the street from here that is $20,000 a year, more than $20,000 a year.
Yeah.
And it's been closed I haven't seen students there for an entire month. I can't imagine, anybody going like, or those parents being happy about that at all. I'm sure they're understanding, but I'm sure they're also thinking like, there's got to be a different way. Like, I'm not just going to spend money just to spend money.
Check this out. It will also depend on state leaders listening to those who know education. Well, okay, if they work in the education industry, they should probably not be listening to him, but okay. For Education Commissioner DeSantis chose former House Speaker Richard Corcoran, who tried to, hey, is he? Oh, no, never mind. He tried to undercut public education. He said remote classes would, quote, maximize student learning. They say, no one believes
No one believes that.
No one believes that.
That's my favorite line. No one believes that. And it's true. Like, from what I've seen talking with parents, students, teachers, it's like, this isn't helping. Like, this virtual learning is obviously not best.
Because we were doing such a good job before.
Right.
All the kids need to be in the classroom. That's the only way they'll learn. Yeah, no one believes that.
Yeah.
Kids are reading at the lowest level since the 90s. And let's see, but the reason I brought it up, though, it says no one believes that students need to be back with their teachers as soon as safely possible. That will require testing, contact tracing, and all other containment measures that public health experts recommend. Who are these public health experts?
Oh, you mean the ones that are like funded by Big Pharma?
Yeah, Bill Gates. Hold on. Where was it? I'm trying to find the.
Oh yeah, that video.
Yeah. Here we go. So here's Fauci, right? Should you wear your face mask, right? Okay, here he is in March 8th. I'm going to skip the whole point. Here it is right here. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. But that was him back on the 8th of March. So when do we listen to the experts? Like, if they change their opinions?
Yeah, that's a
You know what I mean?
question.
Like who are we? I think he's popping up right here. But then even going back, here's the real point, though. The American Federation of Teachers report nailed it. Reopening society and the economy hinges on successfully reopening schools.
Wow.
Why? Because then the parents can go back to work, isn't it?
Wow.
So are they really talking about education? Because I have tons of books behind me that show what the keys to effective literacy are, which is what we do in TechnoTutor, and none of it's been implemented in the school. And reading scores and math ability is dropped and so forth, right? I mean, how's Florida doing in terms of the national rankings, right? Probably
we're
not
doing
too hot. Yeah, I'm in Texas, so I know. Probably similar, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like a joke, right? That it's like it's the same thing with the medical system. Everyone's like, you got to just trust the doctors. Like, you got to just trust the teachers and the education experts. And it's like, but look at their results. Like, medical error is like the third leading cause of death. You know what I mean? It's something like that. It's like people have this like inherent trust in the system. And you and I talked about this last time in terms of that cognitive dissonance where you haven't yet questioned like the authorities, like not realizing, hey, they don't know everything, right? It's the same thing with the education system. What was the other one that you wanted to look at? Is it also in here?
Yeah, the Herald Tribune. That one was looking more at like the speculative, like it's more like what Asif was looking at, but it's from the journal as opposed to from the school itself, because the schools themselves haven't put out any kind of
in Florida.
In Florida, no, they haven't put out any kind of guidelines that I've seen anyway, not yet.
So this is just more like speculation.
Exactly. And so
limited basically to 12 students.
Yeah.
Physical attendance might be optional. And this goes back to what I don't know if I said this earlier or not, but it's like, yeah, I kind of mentioned the point of like, people are going to choose not to go back. They'll just stay at home. And who are the people that are going to be able to do that is the ones whose parents can afford to stay home or get babysitters or a tutor or whatever.
Yeah.
So the really poor kids are the ones who are going to be the ones that have to go to the school and then be subjected to all this social distancing, weird, hyper obsessive compulsive, like hand washing and no playground time. It's like, of course, the people who are on the low end of the economic system are going to be, the ones that are screwed over the most. This is kind of a random thought, but I was looking into in one of the early literacy books, the research books, and they were talking about the whole Head Start. And, remember we talked about how
Yeah.
Sesame Street was founded out of that, from like the whole Great Society thing with Johnson and all that.
Yeah.
And they were saying in there, what was so interesting is that, the whole purpose of, for example, Sesame Street was to, and that's why it's like when you watch it, it's like they're in the ghetto. They're like on, in the streets of New York, and there's a guy in a trash can. It's like, it's supposed to be more like, underprivileged, like lower income sort of feel, what I mean? To like relate to those kids. And it was supposed to help them get more exposure to like the alphabet and numbers and stuff like that, so they could get a head start, right? It was part of that initiative. But it said in the research that actually what happened was it only really helped the kids who already had a good foundation. So it actually made the gap worse.
Yeah.
And that's what I see happening here. Like, what kind of actual learning is going to happen in this environment where it's like you're just like in lockdown the whole time, and like everyone's super hypersensitive? Like, imagine you're in class and some kid like gets sick and takes off their mask and starts like throwing up. Because I remember when I was in elementary school, kids would throw up sometimes, like on the floor or whatever.
Right.
Like, what's going to happen in that environment? They're like going to like lock down the classroom. The kids are going to be quarantined. It's going to be like insane.
Yeah, that's going to be panic mode.
And I know, like, I saw somebody on Facebook, they were like, well, you should just wear your mask and all this stuff. And it's only supposed to be temporary. And I get that's what's being said. But then on the other hand, you have them saying, the CDC and all them, oh, it's going to come back and be worse in the fall or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, because now you have doctors coming out saying that assuming that everything that we think we know about viruses and everything is legit, then we are reducing our herd immunity by us all being locked in, because we're not. And so they're finding now even the people that are going with and presenting with cases now are people who were in quarantine and doing everything properly, right? So we're actually making it worse. So they can predict it's going to be worse because they made it worse by telling everybody to stay home instead of just being out like they would with anything else. Assuming all of that is just what it is, they're saying it is anyways. I don't remember the point I was trying to get at with that point, but it's like with everything.
When a kid is like getting sick in the classroom, it's just going to be more like a traumatic experience for the students.
But I guess what I was trying to get at was, for those people who are like, oh, it's just temporary, but like, this is COVID-19, right?
Yeah.
That implies it's like the 19th strain.
I think that comes from
2019.
2019.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
It's like SARS. It's like SARS-2 or whatever. Okay.
Exactly.
Whatever. My point is like, it's like another version of, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And then there's like multiple strains of the flu. There's all these different points, right?
Right.
So the point I'm getting at though is that it's not going to be the last time there's a virus that spreads. And if you know anything about how viruses evolve and so forth, it's going to mutate and there's going to be more of them. And it's not like as we go forward in time, there's going to be less. So the idea that it's just temporary, it's like if we're willing to, and then, I mean, really look at all the numbers. Not that many people are actually dying from it.
Right.
In terms of the global population, people are actually infected, and they're constantly reducing their models and numbers and everything every day, it seems like now.
Yeah.
So if we were able to do all this for this, what happens when there's one that's a little bit worse? So I don't see any logical way of saying like, oh, it's just temporary. This is the last virus pandemic that's ever going to happen. Like, we're going to wear masks for a little bit and do social distancing, and then we'll go back to normal. Clearly, that's not what's going to happen. It's like we're being conditioned through everything that's going on right now with media and everything to just accept that this is totally normal now.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of ironic, because like what we've been saying for years now in TechnoTutor is that we're going to have a society where people mostly stay at home and do everything from home, but we were always looking at it from the perspective of
automation.
You know what I mean? Like, but now it's like you're seeing that happen in kind of even in a worse way in a certain sense, because it's like now, even if you do go out, you're actually afraid of other people.
Yeah.
It's not like you're just not going out because you don't have a reason to, because there's no more shopping malls, but you can still go out to the park. Now It's like you can't even go have a picnic with 30 people, like a family reunion like we used to do in my family. You can't even do that kind of stuff anymore. They'll call the SWAT team on you. Seriously, I saw a thing in Texas where these guys were doing some kind of protest at a bar or something, and they called the SWAT teams, and they came and
Wow.
and this is in Texas.
Wow.
So
That's crazy.
it is really crazy.
It's ridiculous, like how things are going right now, as far as what they're now calling like what's going to be normal, is because they're not just going to reimagine schools for just a semester or
Right.
for a
Why are
year.
they talking about reimagining schools if it's just limited?
Yeah, that's ridiculous to think like, to think along those lines. Like there's something, a huge serious shift happening, and to kind of play it as if it's like a temporary thing, that's just, you got to be ignorant to believe that. And it's hard to communicate with parents who don't see that. It's like, dude, things are changing. It's like, it brings up this point within me of like, people don't really understand what education is, you know? And they think that education, I don't know if people actually think that going to school is getting an education. I'm sure some people do, but I also know that a lot of people see it as, well, it's something where my kid can be, I know where they're at while I'm at work, you know? And that's really sad, in my opinion.
It's like everybody's so caught up in just trying to survive.
Yeah.
And I know, because I felt like this in my life in the past, when it's like you're in a certain state where you're just trying to get through each day, and even trying to think about, okay, outside of that, it's like you feel like this immense pressure and anxiety about it. But it has to do with processing ability. And I can say for myself, the more I've used TechnoTutor myself,
Yeah.
that goes away more and more and more, because I can sort of handle more information all at once without having to feel overloaded. And so like that experience parents feel of like, I can't question the school system. I can't question my doctor, what they're telling me, all this stuff, because I'm just trying to figure out, what I'm doing at work and get the kids to soccer practice and all this stuff. You see what I mean? And but I do see that people are starting to, as I talk to more and more people, question things, even like my neighbors and stuff, because they're having this time to sit and they don't have all that pressure. I mean, they're also like not making any income, right? So that sucks. But I'm saying that at the same time, they're not in that constant activity for survival mode. They're still in survival mode, but like not, I have to keep doing something, right? And I think that it's very easy for parents to fall into that and not really have the time and the resources mentally, energetically, and so forth to really sit down and look at everything clearly. It's like instead of figuring out how to make all my food at home and make these amazing, elaborate meals full of nutritious food, I just go to the grocery store, whatever they have there, if it's pre-made or whatever, it's in a package, heat it up, I just buy it. I don't really look at the ingredients because I don't have time for that. I just need to put something on the stove so everybody can eat, you know? But when you start making the meals at home and you start learning about it, you start doing that, you realize like you can make your food way better than it was being offered to you in the ready-made, prepackaged way.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with education. The school system is just sort of like, okay, I got my frozen section, frozen dinners, that's like the public school. And then I got my private schools, that's like, the organic section or whatever, you know what I mean? But it's still not the best. Do you know what I mean? It's still not
like the
really fully taking,
prepackaged.
it's still not, it's not taking full responsibility for what it really is. And then you're like, dude, I could just make my own bread from like, wheat that I know where it came from, and I can do all that. And just eating that bread is more nutritious than any fucking TV prepackaged dinner. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can make cookies that have the right ingredients and are healthy for you and taste great versus you eat a package of Oreos, which is not good for you, you know? And it's the same way with education. It's like when you understand the fundamentals, and it's challenging, I think, right now because many parents might feel like it's just too much. But what I found like in my life in terms of really focusing on what I want and pushing myself and using TechnoTutor for myself, increasing my ability to process information, is that I can solve my problems in my life bit by bit. And over time, over a year or two, things can be drastically different than they were before in a positive way.
Yeah.
And so like my relationship with my wife is totally different than it was 3 years ago even, or 2 years ago even, because it's a constant process of actually improving versus just everything is the way it is, that's the way it is, don't question it. And so the same thing with education. as an individual family, you can actually take responsibility at a minimal level and start increasing that over time, and you'll have a totally different end result. It's like if you diverge into, you're going the same direction. If you diverge slightly at the beginning, then miles down the road, you're like miles apart from where you started. And it's the same thing with the starting point with TechnoTutor. It's like you don't have to go full in, like I'm homeschooling, unschooling, all this stuff. You start a little bit, and it's just that little bit of divergence, so that eventually the child can actually take more responsibility in their own education because they understand more.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason why we put the kids into these cookie cutter school systems, is because they're not being taught to develop real self-responsibility. So you can't just be like, okay, stay at home, because the kid's just going to sit and play video games all day. They're not going to educate themselves, but they don't have that desire. They don't have the prerequisite sort of basic understanding to want to learn more and so forth. Because if you look at somebody like a Bill Gates or a Mark Zuckerberg, when they were at home and when they were kids, they weren't just screwing around, just entertaining themselves and hanging out with their friends. They were building things. They were creating things. Or like a Warren Buffett or somebody, or Elon Musk. Like at a young age, they wanted to like investigate and explore and understand. And I don't accept or subscribe to the view that the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Elon Musk and the Bill Gates are just special people and no one else can be like them and they're just our geniuses and we have to worship them. No, everybody has that potential to be genius-like in some area.
Yeah.
But you also can't just pay lip service. Like everyone's a genius in their own right.
Yeah, right.
There's a difference between potential and reality in fact.
Right.
So the problem is when you look at the reality in fact and you're like, well, it's not what we want potential-wise, so it must not exist. It's not possible. Versus you lie to yourself about what the reality is, so you can pretend like it's already that way. You have to be realistic about where we're at.
That's like when people say like, oh, I'm perfect just the way I am. But like you're not living the life that you want. You're not happy.
So you're actually justifying all your limitations. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Versus the other one, which is like, oh, I'm so terrible. I have to judge myself. I'm a sinner, all this stuff, and I can never change. It's the same thing.
Yeah, it is.
So that's why there's like self-honesty. Just be honest about where things are at. But then you forgive yourself. You see where the changes are required. That requires higher levels of processing ability. So what I can say is from the perspective of a parent who's like, this stuff with the school is crazy. I want to support my children more so we can eventually take them out of that. It's very small things you can do, TechnoTutor being one of them, that will make a fundamental difference and will allow you to sort of separate yourself from that more and more if that's what you want to do. So it doesn't have to be all doom and gloom, but it is interesting seeing all the stuff we're looking at because the school system is, I did an interview with, actually one of your clients, David, right, on his podcast, where we talked about the history of the school system. So what we're seeing right now is like the next evolution of the school system, because there was an evolution of the school system back in the industrial age so that we could create an industrial society. And now they're just evolving it so we can have a post-pandemic society where everybody's at home, or there's facial recognition and drones everywhere and surveillance and certificates of immunity passports. And it's just evolving us into that next point of acceptance. Because when you're sending kids to school, just take the schoolwork aspect out of it and just look at it from the perspective of the environment they're in, because that's all they're really learning.
Yeah.
They're not really learning math and science and all that. I know, because look at their scores on the national and the world tests. Look at their abilities when they go to college and so forth. And look at your own abilities as a parent. You don't remember a factor or quadratic equation.
Yeah.
And if you do remember that very little bit, you don't remember like what's the rational zeros theorem. You don't remember anything in real detail and like you can explain it and apply it and do all this stuff. Very few people. And they don't get it from the school system. They had a good foundation. So I just see it as, it's not like, oh, something sinister, something suddenly happening. No, this is just the next little evolution of the system going the way it's been going this whole time, just responding to the new stimulus, which is this whole point going on, right?
Yeah, it's funny that you called it the post-pandemic school system or whatever, right? Because before they were calling it, we're in the intellectual age, right? Before it was like, we're in the industrial age.
Oh, like information age.
Yeah, information age. Yeah. Now it's not, we're not going to call it the information age anymore. It's definitely going to be like post-pandemic age, because just look at how drastically this has impacted the world at large. And it's not just been for like a week or 2 weeks. It's been over 30 days, I think maybe even close to 40 days, right?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's basically, it's interrupted that pattern of what you're used to doing for long enough where it's like now you have a complete blank slate again. And so now anything that gets introduced, even if it's just like slightly better than this, it's going to be accepted, you know?
Well, you know, that's a really cool point because I was in the military for a period of time, for a few years.
Yeah.
And I went through like basic training and all that stuff. And I also, you know, I did summer programs at the Naval Academy and different things. I went through like Army's basic training, I've been different military stuff. And like basic training, whatever branch you're in, you know, and some are worse than others. But when I went through like their simulated Hell Week for like a day, not Hell Week, but it's like a thing they do at the Naval Academy where it's like they're just screaming in your face and yelling at you for like hours on end. It's great. Yeah. But you know, basic training in Air Force and all that, and it's like they put you in a state where you feel like you're nothing. You don't even get to speak unless you're asked to speak. You don't get to do, I mean, it's like, if anyone hasn't experienced it, just watch videos about it. It's like, and I've been through it multiple times. And so when you go through that and you feel like you're literally nothing and you have no rights, you can't even go to the bathroom when you want, you can't do anything when you want, everything is structured, you do what you're told. Like when you're out in the hallway, you're standing in a certain way and you're not looking around. You're not doing anything other than exactly what they tell you. Then when you get out of that, and now you're like at the Air Force Academy as a first year student, which they call a fourth degree, you're like, you have to run around the campus on a certain like strip of like the tile. And you can't talk to anybody when you're outside. You have to carry your bag a certain way and you have to ask permission but it's a little bit better. Like okay. I would say way better than when you're in basic training. So it's like, okay, cool, I'll take this. And then that becomes your life for a year. You know, so it just made me think of that when you're saying that, because it's like, okay, anything that's not just we have to stay at home and we can't even do anything. Okay, if I can wear a mask and go out, I'll do that. That's fine, you know.
Yeah.
But it's like, fuck that, you know. And then now I'm seeing all this stuff saying that wearing a mask actually can increase your risk of infection. It reduces oxygen intake, lowers cognitive functioning.
Yeah.
I mean, it's totally insane. You know, obviously we were talking about education, but it's like you can't help but go back to these points because this is. You know what's also really interesting about it is like everyone's experiencing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not like it really is the most similar thing to like 9/11.
It is.
You know what I mean? Like it was something that was so striking and dramatic and like everybody for a moment stopped. But this is like it won't stop happening.
Yeah.
It's like every day it's happening and it keeps happening and it's like seems like it's more and then you know and I saw somebody said something about it's like 50 9/11s. You know what I mean? And you know what's also weird about it is it's happening most extreme in New York.
That is also
it's
really
fucking weird. It's like what the fuck?
That's a good point.
It's really weird, right? They're getting the brunt of it. Again, they're like probably like, fuck, why did I live here? But it sucks. But you know, I mean, we can read into that whatever you want. But the point is like, it's like another major event. It's striking at the heart of civilization. You know what I mean? Because I think in a lot of ways, that's what New York represents, you know, in most people's eyes.
I think this is worse than 9/11.
Okay.
And I say that just because it actually impacts every individual.
That's what I'm saying. We're all experiencing is what I'm trying to say. Not just seeing it like we all did at the 9/11, for those of us who were alive then. Yeah. But it's like, like we're all being impacted. It's like, it's personally happening to us.
Right. And so more to your point, it's just like you said, it's continually happening. It wasn't just this, because back then it was just that event that happened. It was tragic. Everybody like was upset about it. But if it didn't happen to you personally, you were okay. You know, if you weren't living in New York or you didn't have family that was around that area, you know, it didn't really directly affect you per se. Obviously, there were bigger implications or ramifications of, you know, the events that took place. But this is like on every individual. And it's like you experience the fear on a continuous basis, or at least the general public, right? They're experiencing this on a continuous basis. It's like, no, it's not over yet. No, you can't go back. No, you still have to deal with this. And I wonder, I've heard like this is going to be a joke that might be in poor taste, but I used to hear these jokes about uh, Jewish people being like uh, being known for like being kind of skittish. It was a joke that some comedian had made, and the joke that they were making was, well, yeah, you did away with all the ones that weren't skittish, you know?
Yeah.
But the point that I'm making with that is like kids growing up in today's society, what are they getting impulsed with on a regular basis? Even if we do go back to schools, you know, the way that they're saying that they're going to lay out these schools, it's going to be a very regimented kind of experience where it's not going to be like, you know, your kids are at play and, you know, what school was like for you when you were a kid or your parents or grandparents, whatever. It's going to be this like very much like Asif was saying, as if, you know, what we would consider prison. Like we would not want to experience that. Like I remember going to school and just not enjoying it just because it was boring to me.
Right.
What are kids going to experience today?
That's exactly. It's going to be
Especially
super extreme.
They don't have PE, they don't have drama, they don't have music. Like, what the fuck are they going to enjoy?
It's actually perfect for the implementation of Common Core. If you think about it, like it makes sense why they would be involved with all that, because it's like, okay, we strip out all the unnecessary bullshit. We just give them to focus on specifically the Common Core of things we want them to focus on.
Yeah.
Each child is totally isolated, so there's no outside factors. Like we can figure out exactly. I mean, it's like the perfect situation for testing that. You know, and that may be their way of getting that implemented, because like the government, the US government is not allowed to impose a curriculum and a school system nationwide. It has to be up to the states. The way they got around it before with Common Core was by incentivizing with money. Like, hey, if you implement Common Core, we'll get all this extra funding and stuff. So states were like, okay, sure. And so there's a lot of controversy around that. People were pissed off because they just adopted it without questioning things, and there was a bunch of bullshit in there. But now you have, hey, this is a health issue. This is a medical issue. You know, you have to operate with these standards, and I mean, you're going to need some kind of curriculum. So here it is, right here. It complies with all of the necessary teaching points about hygiene, or I don't know, whatever they're going to do. Yeah. So it makes sense from that perspective.
Also, I realized early on, one of the things that I saw with Florida schools is, in Florida, we have something that's been in practice for a while called Florida Virtual School. And other states started adopting our program because there was already an infrastructure there. Yeah. And so they started using Florida Virtual School, I think in like Alaska and other states like that, right? And so it'll be really easy for someone to look at, oh, New York's got this Common Core thing where, you know.
That's what I'm saying, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's interesting. They're like, Florida has an education system? Oh yeah, let's take that. Let's adopt that. It's like, like McDonald's comes out with like a fucking health protocol and you're like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, like, give me that. Like, what?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's crazy, like with the whole Bill Gates thing, because it's like, you know, Asif made a really good point. Like if Mark Zuckerberg came out and said, you know, we're going to have, I've got an idea for education, everybody would be like, what? No, shut up. Like you don't know anything about education.
Yeah.
But somehow Bill Gates does know about education. Like I get that he's intelligent and we all accept that, but it seems to me he's intelligent in business and in computers, you know,
and in profit motive and in competition.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? Like monopoly, you know, like these kind of things, right? Like that's what he's highly skilled in.
Yeah.
You know, and to say like, oh, well, he could just translate that into something else. Like, well, how come you don't apply that to Trump?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? People would be like, oh, he's just some real estate TV star. Like, what does he know about presidency? But they give Bill Gates a total pass. Right. And it's not that I have some personal vendetta against Bill Gates, but okay, New York is the hardest hit by this whole thing. Okay. And then now suddenly they're going to be working with Bill Gates on the education thing.
Yeah.
But it's not like it's just, okay, Bill Gates, we're fine, random Bill Gates. No, he's like the number one name in also what's going on right now with the whole pandemic thing and the WHO and all that. So it's not like it wouldn't even be the same as Mark Zuckerberg. You see what I mean? Because it's like he's also already like totally entrenched and involved with all of this as well. And then suddenly the hardest hit place from the pandemic is like, hey, we also need you to help us with our school system too. So it's like now they're going to do that. And then that's going to then become like like you said, like the thing that kind of spreads out potentially. You know what I mean? So I just see it. And then you see what they're talking about in Quebec and with what Asif was sharing. It's like, whether it ends up being that extreme thing long term or not, it's definitely going to be a point where, at the very least, not a lot of kids are going to be going to school anymore.
Yeah.
You know, I see that because there's not going to be enough room for them.
Yeah.
You're going to have 12 kids in every class. It's funny because like in our presentation, we talk about there's too many kids in the class.
Right.
It's almost like they were like, well, you won't be able to use that against us anymore.
Right.
Okay, you got us there. Fine, you reduced the number of kids in the class.
Yeah.
You didn't really, but you know, one of our points though is like, yeah, but the teacher doesn't have enough time to spend with each kid reading. So how is the teacher going to actually sit with each child and like read with them? You know what I mean? Like, think about it. Okay, maybe in like high school, it's not really going to matter much.
Right.
I get it, because in high school, I feel like if it's online or it's like that, it doesn't really change much. Right. You're not really getting a lot from being at school because you're only being tested on what you memorize anyways. But kindergarten, like assuming that there's value within having your kids there and interacting and story time and all this stuff, like it's going to totally change that.
Heck yeah.
You know, which from my perspective, the more people who question the education that their child is getting and want to get the best education, the better. I would prefer it doesn't happen where people have to suffer, obviously.
Yeah.
But from the perspective that at least if people are seeing that like, hey, this whole thing doesn't seem right, then they can say, well, I don't want to send my kid to school, you know, like, because I don't want them to have to do X, Y, and Z and all this other stuff. But what would I do? Because I don't know how to educate them.
Yeah.
The reality is the teachers, generally speaking, are not taught how to really educate your child. They're just taught how to implement a classroom management system.
Right.
They're usually not even experts in their particular, what they're teaching those kids.
Yeah.
Right. So with TechnoTutor, what we're saying is you can have a child develop their vocabulary, their processing ability. I mean, they can still be doing stuff online and learning and all that stuff too, but at least they're not just being taught to memorize stuff. Because what they're going to do is when it's online, it's much easier just to be like multiple choice. Okay, you got it wrong, you got it right, blah, blah, blah. It's a lot easier to game that system, especially like when you get to high school and all that and you see that happening. It's super easy to game it.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you know, they talk about the gamification of education, right? It's a double-edged sword. You know what I mean? Because there's that aspect of I'm just going through, sharing the answers with everybody, doing all that stuff. You know, like how do you, and so like, for example, some of the kids I'm in contact with, some of the high school students, for example, those families, they've told me when they're doing their tests online right now, and, you know, in school, and these are in private schools, they have to have one device that's a camera on them. That's like seeing what they're doing.
Yeah.
So they can't be like, you know, on Google or something like that.
That actually makes sense.
I was like, damn, wow. So they're like prisoners in their own room, like, you know what I mean? Like, that's not learning. That's not an environment of learning.
No.
Like with my children, learning happens just through us interacting. And like right now, well, I can't see out my window because I'm kind of low, but, you know, my kids are out there, my 1.5-year-old, my 3.5-year-old, Seneca and Max respectively, are out there with my wife, Katie, building a garden bed next to our family garden for Max. Because he kept wanting to take the tomatoes off of the tomato plant. So I was like, hey, why don't we build you your own garden? You can plant stuff there and take all the tomatoes you want. I don't care what you do in there. And you can just do what you want in it. Because he likes to transplant things. And, you know, and so they're figuring out what kind of soil to put and all that stuff. So that's what they're doing right now. And they're learning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because like, and he'll you know him obviously, but I'm saying for someone who didn't know him, if you talk to him, he can tell you about soil composition and like, you know, what kind of plants grow in what season and all kinds of stuff. And like basic chemistry, you know, that you need iron in the soil and nitrogen and other stuff, right? Stuff that you wouldn't learn as a 3.5-year-old, you wouldn't learn as a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 10-year-old even. Right. You wouldn't ever really learn that stuff really. You would memorize what nitrogen is and what it's, you know, it's 14.01, you know, atomic weight or whatever in the periodic table. You don't even know what that means. You don't know how to apply any of that, right? And so the education kids are getting is not a real education. It's just a memorization to schooling. And what's so fascinating about it is you see how the average person falls in line with this whole narrative that's going on. That is a direct result of them having gone through the education system and never challenged it at all.
Yeah.
It's exactly the purpose of it. The industrialists designed the education system, it's really a schooling system, so that they could steer society in whatever they want. So they're not like guessing like how are people going to respond to this. They know. They're already measuring every word and everything. Because they can predict how we're already going to respond as a collective.
Yeah.
But the one major difference, I was thinking about between this and 9/11, other than obvious things, is that in 2001, we didn't have YouTube and like the internet like it is today. So you didn't have like that massive real-time questioning of what's going on.
Yeah.
Which is what you have right now. And the ability to talk about it and what's the implication of this for education and all these other things.
Yeah.
You didn't have what we're doing right now. You just didn't exist, not even close. It wouldn't even exist for another 4 years until they invented YouTube.
Yeah.
And by then it was like, oh, you're still talking about that? Like, oh God, like now it's like real time, right?
Right. Yeah. But at the same time, now we're also seeing like YouTube, Twitter, like all those social media feeds, like cracking down on like what they deem to be like unacceptable or false, or, just like it's really blocking freedom of speech, at least here in the States, right? We have that right to freedom of speech.
Yeah.
But on these platforms, I guess technically because they're private platforms.
It's only the government can't restrict you, right?
Right.
But what's interesting though is I wonder if there could be an argument made, because they're saying they'll only go along with whatever the government narrative is.
Right.
So if they're only promoting the government narrative and that whole point, I guess from a certain perspective, you could say you're just telling me to say I can only say what the government is saying. So it's like an arm of the government. The problem with it though is these aren't U.S. governments. This is like the World Health Organization, which is not even actually a government. It's really just something funded mostly by, like, what was it we saw? The U.S. was like the biggest funder.
$400 million a year.
Bill Gates, right?
Yeah.
Then
Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, $200 million.
Was the second most, and then above all the other countries except the U.S.
Yeah. And
now it's going to be number one since Trump said the U.S. isn't going to fund it anymore. So it's like that's actually a pretty smart move, because people have to talk about what's the funding behind it.
Yeah. I really liked that move, as far as like, okay, we're seeing some shady behavior coming from this organization. We give you the most money and you're not protecting like our interests. So we're out. And we already have like a CDC and everything. So it's interesting, that the way that it's spun in the media is that, we're not participating with the rest of the world or whatever. And people go along with that. But if you just look at objectively, like, if I were, it's like people say all the time, like, I pay for these governmental bodies here in the States, it's like my tax dollars pay for your job. You're supposed to be representing me, right? People say that all the time. Not that we actually do anything about it. It's not like we can actually pull our funding from them, right? But if we could, I'm sure many people would.
I was looking at, while you were talking, the ownership of Twitter.
Isn't it Jack Dorsey?
Yeah, I know he's the main guy, but hold on, maybe this is just old. 2015, because he might have sold his shares. There was a period of time, at least, where Prince Al-Walid bin Talal bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, a Saudi prince, became the second largest shareholder.
Oh.
And the co-founder, it was like Jack Dorsey, then this Prince Al-Walid.
Yeah.
And it was the co-founder. And it looks like his shares are gone, though. But I'm pretty sure that guy got arrested.
Oh, really?
I could be wrong, because it's like a lot of information. Prince Al-Walid. I remember there was like this whole crackdown. in Saudi Arabia, and a bunch of these like Saudi princes got arrested and so forth. I'm just looking at it right now. Yeah, he and other prominent members were arrested.
Did it have to do with?
He was released after he spent 3 months in detention. He was dropped from the world's billionaires list due to lack of current information. But where does it talk about Twitter? Maybe I should share this. Hold on, I'll just share.
Yeah, was he arrested on like basically suppressing information?
I don't remember.
What?
It probably says it right here. Let me go back to what it was talking about. Money laundering, bribery, extorting officials.
Oh, okay.
I remember this happened. Yeah, 2017. Four Seasons Hotel Group. He invested in Chase Citigroup.
Wow.
Let's see. Let me get down to
purchased 10% of Saks Fifth Avenue.
This is really interesting, though. Hold on a second. 2011. Oh, here we go. 2011. Here we go. I didn't see it. 300 million in Twitter. Gave Kingdom Holding more than 3% share. 2015, he announced he would donate his fortune to charity at an unspecified date. But when I looked up the number one the shareholders in Twitter, he wasn't listed as the top three. So maybe it's changed, because that article I was reading previously said it was number two. It was an article that was 2015.
What was that Bin Laden group, Saudi Bin Laden? Does that have anything to do with like
on the Wikipedia?
Yeah.
Well, Bin Laden was royal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was like the son or one of the sons or something of like the king or a prince or something like that. Yeah. Huh. He wasn't just some like rando like dude.
Do you remember that the thing that happened in Turkey where there's
See, this is talking about him in 2015 being
3%.
Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe he sold some of it, or maybe someone got a bit more. But they just the reason I bring it up is because if you look at this, it doesn't even mention him. I wonder if he's like the fourth biggest shareholder, and that's why they made the list only the top three. I don't know. Just thought that was interesting. But the reason I wanted to bring it up was because you could see in that particular case, he was at one point one of the top two shareholders.
Yeah.
So what influence would he have in Twitter? And he's like a huge enemy of Trump's.
Oh.
There's like a famous meme. There's like a famous meme. It's like a real thing, not a meme, but it was memed out. And it was like back in before the election, 2014 or 2012 or something like that. And I think Trump was like criticizing Obama or something. And that Prince Al-Walid, this was, I think it was after he got that interest in Twitter. He's on Twitter, right? And he says to Trump, if you're so great or whatever, why don't you run for president? And Trump tweeted back to him, be careful, right? And then you fast forward to now, Trump becomes president. 2 years later, that guy gets arrested for corruption and bribery and shit in Saudi Arabia. It's like, oh, what the hell's going on? Right?
Oh, shit, that's crazy.
Really, but the reason I bring it up, just because you're talking about social media and all that stuff of like, how they're cracking down, it's like, why is it everything that seems to be happening in the social media sphere always favors the side of the narrative, the media, the mainstream?
Right.
It's not based on the freedom of expression side or like everybody should just have a chance to talk. It's like they're removing content. They're going along with the WHO, even though the WHO contradicts itself and so forth, right?
Yeah.
Like we saw that thing with Fauci I shared earlier, where in March 8th, he was saying no one needs to wear a mask. There's no point. It's not going to do anything. Yeah. Now suddenly they're saying everybody needs to wear it, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, if that doesn't make you question the fact that the authorities don't even know what's going on, then how can you trust what they're doing with your child's education? Like let's try Bill Gates' method. Okay, give him the control of the education system for 10 years. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, let's see what happens now. Let's try this again. Let's try this. And it's like, meanwhile, it says in these books, like if you can automatically recognize words without thinking about it and know their definitions, you can read literally anything.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
So it's like, we're like, okay, let's just put that into technology and make that available to people. Then they can educate themselves. So when you think about it, when you go to school, do they tell you what you're supposed to learn?
Well, they tell you what to memorize.
No, yeah, and I'm not trying to get into semantics about what you're learning. I mean, do they tell you the information like this is the truth? This is the information. Like think about a history book.
They give you a history book and they say like this is what, this is the truth.
Right.
Essentially, is what they say is like, whereas
like if they wrote the history book part about this pandemic, are they going to be like, and there was this other doctor named such and such Rashid Bashar, and he said it wasn't this way. These are all the different ways of looking at it. Or it was like, this is what happened. This is what happened. This one people died. Just like they say in World War II, they never give any other perspective. World War, Vietnam, this and this. Like it's
like the U.S. entered because of Pearl Harbor, and nobody had any designs on entering the war before then. Right. All that.
Think about what you learn in chemistry. Do they say here's all the different ways of looking at chemistry?
Oh no.
And in fact, when you take AP chemistry, you basically get up to like the 1920s in terms of an understanding of what they thought of atoms.
Wow.
Yeah. Huh. It's like you're not even really getting into the real anything current at all.
Yeah.
Right. So what I'm saying is, if you look at the difference in philosophy of education versus the school system versus TechnoTutor, you have here's what you need to learn it, memorize it, repeat it. Okay, go ahead. We're not going to make sure you develop the critical thinking skills, expression, communication, knowledge, and application in real life type stuff. Just this information. TechnoTutor says we're going to mainly focus on here's how you can process information at better and higher levels so that you can be totally unlimited in your ability to learn anything you want. And then there's all the information's already out there. Now you go and use discernment. You see the difference?
Yeah.
Well, people will argue that what the school system is doing, like, oh, everyone has a right to education, right?
Yeah.
People aren't being educated. They're just being filtered through a system to figure out who had a good foundation at home.
Yeah.
And so the kids who I think are going to be the losing end of all of this, again, are going to be the kids from the lower income families because their parents can't afford to do anything. So put them in the daycare, which is what we call the education system, the school system.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are you grinning about?
I gotta use the restroom.
Okay. Well, why don't we leave it there? That's always a good stopping point. Whenever one of us has to pee or something, we just
yeah.
We've been talking about it long enough. So I hope everybody enjoyed that. Please share the video if you're seeing it on YouTube or Facebook or whatever. But we'll leave it at that. So thanks for the chat, Jake, and I'm sure we'll do it again because it's fun chatting about this stuff.
All right, sounds good.
See ya.
See ya.
Bye, everybody.